Hello and welcome to the workshop, where today, just ahead of Bachmann's Autumn 2024 British Railway announcements, we've got an exclusive sneak peek at one of the brand new toolings. Now, Richard, tell us about what you've got on offer in front of us here.
Hi Mark, so this is the EFE Rail PCV Propelling Control Vehicle for 00 scale.
So tell us a bit about the history behind these vehicles.
Well, the PCVs were actually TOPS code NAA, but more commonly known as PCVs, Propelling Control Vehicles. And these were created for British Rail's parcel sector, which later became known as the Rail Express Systems, as we commonly know it. And they were created by converting Class 307 EMU vehicles, which had been redundant, built in the 1950s, and they had been superseded on the Great Eastern Main Line by new units, so they became available. There were initially plans to make a Class 300 parcels train out of the full units, but they scaled back the plans and decided, right, we'll just make some propelling control vehicles to operate with standard GUVs and BGs, which were already in the parcels fleet, so a lot less cost involved than converting a whole 4-car train. And obviously later in life we saw the 325s built for mail traffic instead as dedicated mail units. These were conceived to allow more efficiencies in operation, so locomotives wouldn't need to be used for propelling moves or releasing the train locomotive at depots and freight or mail facilities. Primarily with the Willesden hub in mind, as Royal Mail were trying to take away parcels traffic from the London passenger terminuses and bring it into a centralised location at Willesden. And the first vehicles were created in 1993. There was 2 prototypes done at the Derby RTC Centre, and then they learned from those and created a fleet of 40 vehicles which were converted by Hunslet Barclay in Kilmarnock. They went into traffic, operating for Rail Express Systems initially, and their privatisation, EWS took over that sector and took on the Royal Mail trains and operated them until 2003, when the contract ended and the stock was taken out of use. EWS looked for future or other means to use these vehicles, but sadly they didn't find anything, and they went into storage and may have now been scrapped. There's a few still around, languishing in sidings, a couple preserved, but generally they're now out of service.
So they were used for low-speed operations at the various mail hubs?
Yeah, so they'd be marshalled as part of a train. A common formation was a PCV at either end of a couple of GUVs. All had capacity to carry mail, and then they'd be hauled by a Class 47 typically. For Res, it was 47-7s. They had the correct RCH jumper equipment fitted to allow the push-pull control, and they'd be hauled on the network, and then when they reached the terminals, they could then be used to propel the train and shunt it around the terminus without having to have a second locomotive or a shunter or extra crews for that purpose. So they brought an efficiency in that manner, but they weren't used as we know DBSOs or DVTs, where they were actually travelling at full speed in propelling mode. They were limited to 40 miles an hour propelling, but could be hauled at 100 miles an hour. So they wouldn't generally be seen leading a train on the main line. They were just used for that purpose, to turn trains and to release locomotives.
So quite a comprehensive history behind these vehicles. Let's look a little deeper into the model that you've got here, brand new model. Tell us a little bit about the development of it.
Of course, Mark. So the real vehicles were created from the Class 307s, as we know. They were obviously suburban electric units with a lot of windows, doors, and typical features of a multiple unit. What they ended up with after the conversion was the essentially flat sides, or bereft of much detail. They plated over the windows. You can see there's the line depicting the plating of the windows on the model, and there was roller shutters doors fitted on both sides, a pair at each side, to allow mail to be loaded and unloaded. The cabs were refurbished, the ends were changed, and the brake pipes were moved to a lower position on the buffer beam, along with ETH being fitted, and they had the RCH jumper cables to allow the push-pull operation with the traction at the other end. It's the bogies B5s. They were fitted with the cab end having the cab steps as well, and the AWS magnet, which are all featured on the model. And then there was the speedometer, which is fitted to the bogie and connected to the chassis. Obviously, for a practical point of view, that has to be separate. But there's a representation of the cabling going from the bogie to the chassis, which is a nice little feature. On the roof, they fitted the radio pods for the shorter cab radios. And generally, all of those details we've been able to put into this model.
So that gives us an indication of what's outside, if you like, of the model. You've got some wonderful detail on the bogie work, the speedometer cable, there's AWS magnets, I believe, underneath. What about the physical interior?
Well, obviously, as an interior to the model, there's no windows to see inside, so there is a cab interior at the front, but inside the actual model, we've just got the electronics, and they control the directional lighting. The vehicles were only fitted with lighting at the cab end because they weren't needed for lights at the rear end for obvious reasons. And the wipeout lights which were fitted have been recreated again on the model, and they offer day or night mode forward running lights and also red lights where it's at the rear of the train. These can be controlled by analog and DCC users using 2 microswitches underneath the vehicle to provide day or night mode. And turned off, you get no lights, and using each switch you can select whether you want day or night. And on DCC, that's controllable by a function button as well. For DCC, there's also a cab light which you can turn on and off using a separate function, and that is all powered through an X18 decoder. So it's a body removal to reveal the decoder socket, which is an X18, and you fit your decoder to be able to use the lights fully on DCC.
So how many models are you making for the initial run?
Well, there'll be 4 options to start with, Mark, and the colour scheme is the red and grey, but there's an option with no res branding but with Royal Mail branding. There's an option with neither Royal Mail or res branding, and there's a weathered version as well. So 4 to choose from, all with different marine numbers, of course.
Now this is an EFE Rail product. How does that fit in with the Bachmann range?
Well, with it being a sort of unique individual vehicle, it felt like an obvious choice to go down the EFE Rail route for this project. But given our wider catalogue of branch line 00 scale models, we've obviously got the Govs, the BGs, things like the 47, the 90, a lot of red stock. So it's a nice complement to that, to allow people to expand their collection and add this unique but very interesting vehicle to a train formation and enhance their mail services.
Now typically, as you mentioned earlier, a formation would typically be 4 or 5 vehicles with one of the units at each end.
That's right, yeah. A common formation was a PCV at each end with 2 Govs and then a locomotive at the front, which would often be a 47-7. 90s were also used, as we said, and 67s came into traffic and were put onto these services by AWS as well.
So you mentioned the synergies with the RES stock across the broader Bachmann range. When can we start seeing more stock to go with it?
Well, we've actually got some BGs and GUVs coming out in the next British Rail announcements, Mark. So to go alongside the PCVs, people will be able to add those to their collection as well at the same time if they've not already got them. And things like the Class 47, where we've obviously invested a lot of brand new tooling for that model. We have got the correct ends and the correct combination of parts to do the Res 47-7s, which we used on these such services, and we're preparing artwork for those now. So in 12 to 18 months, I'd expect them to be announced formally and join in the lineup.
Exciting times. So importantly, how much and availability?
Well, the recommended retail price is going to be $74.95 with a small premium for the weathered version, and these are on the way to us now. So they'll be in shops in August 2024, and you can buy all of our EFE Rail range from any Bachmann stockist. We've got, of course, the British Railway announcements around the corner on the 7th of August, and in that we'll obviously feature the PCVs, and we've also got the new tooling from Bachmann Branch Line, which is the Class 08 and 09 diesel shunters, and the Graham Farish V2 steam locomotive in N-scale. So they'll be revealed in all their glory, along with a whole raft of other new products. So really want to tune in for, Mark.
Absolutely. Well, look, Richard, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really looking forward to seeing all the new announcements. August the 7th is the date for your diary. And of course, for all the Bachmann news, you can see our website at keymodelworld.com. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.